Howdy, it's Liz again. I've been working on a couple of challenges the last few months, which have really stretched me and caused me to try some new things. And I realized I needed to go back rather than start a new challenge and work on some unfinished projects and use up some of my stash. I really need to use up some of my stash. And even though these challenges encourage you to do that, I managed to acquire more. It's amazing how that happens. I'm constantly, because I have a home printer and I use digital files, generating new prints. And this is a great collection that I printed not long ago and I did a review for. If you're interested, it's by Far Hill and it's called Matin Pluvieux, which I think means rainy morning. And they're very sweet. They're light colored and I really want to use them. And as I was looking around the studio here, trying to figure out what I was going to make with them, I found this great little book cover. My husband was learning to decoupage book covers, and I think we have a pile of 6 or 8 practice covers. And they all have some little boo-boos, eccentricities, however you'd like to say, where the napkin tore, or he had an issue with the Mod Podge, something like that. So this is a perfect opportunity for a little rehab video. I love the way the papers go with this, and I've pulled out some additional purples and creams because these pull it a little bit towards the blue, and I want to get some of the mauve and the purple back into it. But I need to do a couple of fixes on the cover, and this kind of fix could happen to anybody. The napkin that he was working with is one of those smaller ones, and you have to piece it together if you're going to decoupage with it. And sometimes you get issues. And these portions of the front and back cover are great, and where he patched it over the spine, there's some issues on either side of the spine. And sometimes, if you're going to decorate a cover, you can easily cover up something in the front center of the cover. Well, the front center of the cover is fine. So this is a little bit of a challenge. I have to figure out how to fix these areas. And I've been looking at a couple of different things. I know that I want to pull out more purple. So I pulled out this piece of paper. I'm thinking what I can do is take some of the lace that I have. I do actually own some lace. I don't use it a lot, but this is a fix. I'm thinking that I can put some of the paper down and creatively tear it so that it covers some of the problem areas around the top and the bottom, and then lay the lace over it. I like this lace. It's very chunky and it is hard to glue down. The paper underneath it will give me the opportunity to sew the lace to the paper and then apply both to the cover. And I think if I do matching or coordinating panels on the front cover and on the back, I can cover up the problem areas and it will look natural. I also have a few other elements that I'm thinking of putting on the cover to go with it, so it doesn't look just like a lace, patch on the front. Make it blend in, right? Give it some friends. So that's the cover. I think I want to wrap it around the edges because it's really hard to see, but there are a couple of bobbles here on the edge and it's a little bit rough. And if I wrap the lace over it, that will cover it. There's also a really easy fix on the inside. When you're decoupaging and you're wrapping a napkin around the edge of the book, you need to leave enough room to cover the edges with the end paper that you put in here. And it's a little bit tight up here and here at the edge of the book. So I'm going to decoupage, if I can pull this into so you can see it. There you go. If I can decoupage that, just a little piece right here. And There's another one, a little bit on the cover where the napkin tore. And I think I can just fix this little bit of white showing through with a little bit of ink, and that will work. You can just touch up little boo-boos like that with ink and nobody will notice, as long as you use an ink that won't smear, because we're going to go over it again with Mod Podge. And if you use a non-permanent ink, you'll get some color smearing, which, you know, depending on your look, may be fine too. It may blend itself in. So those are a couple of boo-boos that I'm going to fix. Then we're going to put in some end papers and some lovely papers, and this is going to turn out, I think, to be a very nice little journal. So let me get out some tools and we will proceed. Okay, I'm back. I got out my different inks to try, and you could do this with a Sharpie if you have a big collection of Sharpies. I think this green olive Ranger ink, which is archival, is a little bit closer, and I did a little experimenting with a Q-tip, which I think will work for what I want. I just need to cover up this tiny bit, and actually I'm going to zoom you in for this here. Hold your breath right there. This tiny little piece here. So we're just going to do a quick dab. The only thing we're trying to do is make the leaf look solid again, so that the white of the book underneath is not showing through. That looks better already. And I am getting just a touch of darker area around it. I think I'm going to go in with the Sharpie just to see if I can color just the shallow areas where it's the whitest a smidge. And that makes it look just a little bit darker. I think it's okay. It does highlight it just the tiniest bit, but I can live with it. The other thing I discovered was a tiny piece up, down here, which I don't think is going to be covered by the lace. And once again, it's in just the littlest bit of a hollow there. This is just going to be on the edge of the lace. And then there was a tiny piece. And I hear you saying, why are you fixing these itty bitty little tiny little pieces? They are just a smidge more obvious in person. This is tea dye. The Distress ink. Wait, hold on. This way. And up. Distress ink tea dye. And that just covers the tiniest bit right there. Okay, and with that, those fixes are done. That was easy. Now, on the inside, we had this issue with the too tight trim for the napkin, and I have gotten another napkin, and ordinarily I would not use a solid edge on a napkin, but you can see that we want to cover it right to there and then through the spine. So I am actually going to cut it. And we only need about an inch. I'm going to cut an inch off first and then I will trim it down. Generally you want your napkins to have sort of an organic torn edge, but here we're looking to cover something that's very straight. How does that look? Looked a little bit better when the green was on the green, didn't it? Yes. Okay. So let's cut this here. Straighten that up since I did such a fabulous job on it. And we'll put that down there. How's that look? Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then probably we will trim it on this end about here. Okay, now I also noticed that this little piece here is coming up. And this is, it's the paper that's wrapped around this cardboard spine here. The first thing I want to do is glue this down. And I'm using Fabri-Tac for this. And I'll hold that here for a moment. Problem is, it's kind of in a dip in the book here. There we go. I'm just using the tip of the Fabri-Tac glue tab here. There. And that will not poke through our napkin, hopefully. So, I have an enormous brush that I like to use for the decoupage. Since we're just doing a small piece here rather than get my bowl out, I'm going to go ahead and just put the Mod Podge right on the brush. This is the sort of crafting by the seat of your pants when you're doing something small. And we'll go right up here. When I decoupage, I generally like to initially just put the Mod Podge underneath the napkin. I find that it doesn't saturate the napkin quite so much as doing a coat under and a coat over. And if it starts to get saturated, I will leave it and come back to it after it has had an opportunity to dry a little bit, because you get a lot more bubbles if it's saturated. All right, so we're under that. Now we're going to put our napkin down. Get this fairly far up here. And you want to work it into the crease a little bit, because if you don't, you will not have flexibility when your spine moves. And I very often will lift it up and check. And I find that this is the perfect thing for the side of your little finger to do. Just poke, poke, poke right in there. And that looks good. Some of the napkin was a little bit longer than some of the other pieces. You can either tear it off or just stick it down this way. Make sure I got it all the way to the edge here. And go a little bit under. My brush is a little bit dry, but it doesn't take a huge amount. Okay, so that is good. It is stuck down. We're in good shape there. That was a pretty easy fix. We're going to give this just a moment to dry, and I'll go rinse out my brush. Okay, I'm back. So here is my plan. I had this sheet that I decided that I was going to put underneath the lace so that I could sew the lace onto it and get it nice and straight, because I have had an issue with this lace before, getting it to stick to things. And I'm going to do this on both the front and the back cover, so I cut this piece of paper in half. And I'm going to switch the two so that I can use this line from the edge of the paper, where it didn't print to the edge, to line up the lace and sew it, and then trim it. So I'm going to sew it essentially just inside the purple, keeping it straight all the way along, and then trim the paper out from underneath. Okay, and then I am going to decoratively tear this paper so that it will cover the boo-boos and make sort of a crescent shape. And then I'm going to decorate the rest of the cover so that it looks natural. To wrap around the edges, I'm still debating what I'm going to do wrapping around the edges. I think I have to wrap the lace around. I think I probably want to wrap the paper around. And I'm thinking of the finish on the inside of the book. For the end paper, I think I'm going to want the end paper to go under the paper that's wrapped around, but have the lace go over it, which presents some interesting complications. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark on my pieces of paper in the area that I'm going to cut off, the sewn area, the area that I'm going to want to sew. So that's to the bottom of the book here and the top of the book here. So essentially when I get to the sewing machine, I'm going to sew from here to here, and that will leave my paper and my lace loose so it can go under the end paper and over the end paper. So let's do that on both the front and the back of the book. So they're going to be the same, but if you wanted to adjust your pattern paper, which at this point I'm just grateful I have it right side up, you could do that. So I think we're good. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and sew the lace to the paper and come back, and you're not going to see that because I can't, without changing my whole film setup, show you the sewing machine. So just imagine me using the sewing machine, all right? I'll be back in a minute. Okay, sewing has been accomplished. I came to sewing late in life, and the best thing that can be said about my sewing skills are that they aren't horrible. I got it relatively even, considering the lace, because of the tension in the different pieces. It's not even. It's not bad. And I used a coordinating thread and a zigzag stitch, so you can see, well, you can't see, it's pretty invisible. So I'm pleased with the result. So now what we're going to do is figure out where we need to tear these. Do we care which way the cover goes? I think I want this to be the back and this to be the front. You get a little bit of the other flower on the front. So we're going to position this right about there. We've sewn the lace down to here and here, so that is good. So this is going to be trimmed a little bit, so I need to allow a little extra for that to be trimmed off. So I'm going to position this slightly up on the spine, and I need it to go, I need this piece to be covered here. So that is right there. So definitely it needs to go to there. I know, where's my pencil? What did I do with the pencil? I am forever losing pencils. Here we go. We want it to be inside that mark. So this part is going to be torn off, but it needs to be inside that mark. And let's see. I think the bottom we have a little bit more leeway with. So let's just start at the top, and we'll be fairly conservative. and see how we feel about it. So there's our pencil mark. I didn't quite make it to the pencil mark, but we can always tear off more. And let's curve back around to the bottom. So this is where we're going to line it up. And we can go a little bit inside this mark we know. Let's get rid of this right now. I don't want to do that because that shows how far I've sewn it. Never mind. We'll put that back on the spine for the moment. I think we wanted to make it a little bit closer. So we're going to go a little bit inside this mark, which is where we know we want it to be. We're going to add in a little character here. A little bit of a rougher tear. We are going to color these edges. And we didn't need it to be exactly symmetrical. So I think the character helps us out here. I think we're pretty good right there. We got most of that. I could have used a little bit of coverage. Oh wait, I can slide it down. There we go. That's where it's going to be. There's a smidge of an oops right there. We're going to cover that with something else. So I think for the cover, we are good. All right, so we're going to set this one aside, and we're going to look at the back. Now, the oopses on the back go to about right here. So we need a thicker coverage on the back. So they say all of this in here. I'm going to do the same thing on the back. Right about there. Still, it's a little thick. It could go thinner, a little bit thinner on the top. Let's not make the mistake we made on the front and go too far. And we'll add a little bit of character as we go along. On the back, we may not decorate the way we're going to do the front with some other things. So this may be the only thing on the back. Okay. Still a little bit, well, yeah, a little bit thick. We'll go thinner where we can here. That's going to be about where it is. And we know we can go thinner at the bottom, so let's do that. Leaving it thicker at the top. Where our problem children are. Okay. I kind of like that. Let's antique the edges and trim and see how we feel about that. go ahead and trim my paper under the lace, hopefully without cutting the lace. So that there is just a hint of paper here at the edge of the lace. And I'll need to check when I glue this down, remind me later, check when you glue this down where your sewn edges are. I think that's good. And we'll do the same thing on the other piece of paper. Just under the edge of the lace. Okay. Get my stray threads while I'm here. I don't know about you, but I end up with a huge number of threads at the end of the day when I'm sewing. And for this, I'm going to use the tea dye again. It goes nicely. It's not too antique-y. Vintage photo, I know, was a favorite of a lot of people. And I like vintage photo. I use it for a lot of things. But when you're doing stuff that's off-white, or you just want a tiny bit of coloring, I really like the tea dye. If you want a super grungy look, of course you go darker. But this gives it just a hint of color on the edge without being really noticeable. Alright, I've already screwed this up because I've lost track of which one is the front and which one is the back. And actually that goes really nicely with those flowers. And I may do the other edge of the paper as well with the lace on it. The ends, of course, will be tucked in under the end paper in the book. So I am not worried about those. So yeah, we should probably do this side too. Just because we're going to give this a very light coat here. And this will provide actually a little bit of camouflage for the piece of paper that's under it as well. I'm just doing a super light coat. I don't want it to be very noticeable at all on this edge because we're not trying to attract attention. We're trying to conceal. Alright, so let's see if this one is the back, and this is going to go here, and this one is the front, and it's going to go here. I think we are in pretty good shape right there, because that's where my sewn bits are. That's where my boo-boos are. I'm pretty pleased with that. Okay, now we need to make sure everything is in the right position. We need to glue it down. I'd really like to verify that this is going to fold correctly, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do that until I have it glued down. which is kind of a conundrum, but we're going to go with it. For this job, it's going to be Fabri-Tac. So let's just do a quick verify here. That's where my edge is. I have these pressed up against the lump of the spine. And I probably want them to move over just the tiniest smidge so that I don't accidentally glue it to the spine. So I've moved it a millimeter. And I am going to try to stay out of the edge of the spine here so that it doesn't interfere with the folding. And I'm just following this over so that I can get this down right here and secure it. And then I'm going to do gluing from the other end. Okay. You're going to say, that is the strangest way to glue something, Liz. Well, yes, I know I'm going to wrap the edges around, and what I'm most concerned about is getting one edge into place so that I can then turn it. So once again, we're going to move this just a smidge away from the spine. And here's our sewn spot. Here's our sewn spot. I think I sewed this one a little bit further down. So once again, we're going to peel this up a smidge and go across here where we know it is, because we don't want any glue hanging out in the wrong spot, and glue that right there. So I'm going to sit here and hold this for a moment, just like that, and then we are very gingerly going to flip this around in the other direction and peel it up. Let's do this one because we did this one first. Go straight down the line here. And I'm going to kind of go as I go along so that I know that I'm not going beyond where the paper is, because it's an uneven edge. And by doing that, I don't have glue squirting out in all kinds of odd spots, or at least I hope I don't. Alright, I'll squish that one down a little bit. It's a very technical term, squishing. And we'll come back and do this one all the way down that edge, and then back and forth as we move it along so that we're not over, again, where the paper is. And up to there. All right. I have to say, so far, I am really liking this. I hope you are too. We're going to give this just a moment to sit here, and then we're going to do a quick how does it close test. And the answer is it closes pretty well. So here's what the front now looks like, and here's what the back now looks like. Probably could have gone a little bit less aggressive on the paper, but I am going to bring in some other elements so that it looks at home. We've covered up our boo-boos. We're going to wrap them around on the inside. And I think actually we're secure enough that we can roll this over here and glue this down. This edge is going to be a little bit of a problem right there. I don't want that to catch on anything. I am going to go back over it with decoupage, so that will help. I can smooth that down. All right. I'm going to put a little bit of glue here and out to the edge and a little bit in between. Getting a nice tight roll around the edge of the page is important whether you're decoupaging or gluing the paper down. Give it a big squish. And we are going to have the inside papers go over this, so as long as it is down nicely, I'm not too worried. It's hard to put something over, hard to put another paper over a piece if the first piece isn't flat. So that is my main concern, making sure that it is rolling up flat up over the edge and then lying down flat right here. And this one is good. This little edge right here where it's torn just at the fold, I think I can fix with decoupage. And we'll give this a flip. And this, I think I'm going to trim. I have a lot of paper here. When I am folding paper over, I like to have an inch more if it's a thicker stock, thicker spine cover, whatever, just so you have a little bit more real estate. But I think more than an inch, you're really just adding extra bulk, unless you have something particular that you're trying to cover with that extra paper. I don't think you need it. And I can see under here the roughness that Bob had when he was doing the decoupage around the edge here. That's part of what we're trying to cover. It's a little bit rough. You get those wrinkles sometimes, particularly with decoupage. Now this piece right here, I sewed about 1 stitch to maybe 2 stitches too far. So I'm just using the X-Acto knife to pull that out so that I will be able to separate the fabric from the paper, just like that. Alright, and I'm going to glue that here. And up and over. Beautiful. Alright, this is where you really appreciate your thumbs. So, now I'm going to pick a piece of paper to use for my end paper here, and probably cut it to size, and then I'm going to be folding the lace over it, and I have no idea how I'm going to finish the lace that's folded over. I got to think about that. I thought it would be too bulky if I ran the whole strip of lace down here. So we're going to let this dry. We're going to give this some additional thought. We're probably going to cut some end papers, and I will be back with our continuation on the rehab of this book. I picked end papers for the book. I went with this off-white and celery color, which I quite like. I cut them, I put them into the book. I took the lace and trimmed it, folded it over and glued it down. And then I agonized for some period of time over how I was going to cover it. I almost wished I'd left it long enough to meet in the center and then put something there in the center. But I decided instead to cover it and make sure that it was anchored here in the center. I'm going to use eyelets to bind this book, which will give this some extra protection because this lace is bulky. And I made a pocket on both sides that is big enough to accommodate. You can see that it's open here, going across the spine and up both sides. So this is in the process of drying, and I'm going to flip it over so that you can see what I did on the cover. I did find a lovely purple butterfly to put on as an accent piece, and I fussy cut it. I am a terrible fussy cutter, and I had a few little bits of white in the body of the butterfly, and I came in with an ink stamper, and this is the one I use for my tea dyeing and antiquing, but I have a purple color, and I just stamped over it lightly, and you can actually see on my stamping sheet just the residuals, just enough to cover any white spots around the edge where I didn't quite get the paper, because it's quite fussy around the inside of the butterfly wings and the butterfly's head. So I glued that down. I'm going to go back over and decoupage to seal it. And I also put the nozzle of my glue bottle, Fabri-Tac, underneath this lace, which was only adhered here where it's sewn to the paper and then around the edges. And I wanted to go in under the parts that are a little bit more solid and just hit it on the underside with the glue to stick it down. It still has a little bit of play here on the edge, so that if I want to do something further and it needs to be stuck up under the lace, I can, but it is held down essentially on this line where the thicker pieces are in the lace. So I think at this point I'm almost finished with the cover. I'm going to go in and do a little bit more decoupage. I could fuss it at some point in the future, but I think we have successfully rehabbed this cover. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you will find some inspiration from this and dig out some perhaps earlier works that you weren't happier with, or something that wasn't going the way you expected it to, and you've acquired new skills and you can do what it needs to bring it back to being usable and, in fact, quite nice. Thank you so much.